Dear participants, we are having a great opportunity to listen to the words by another great knowledgeable speaker. Yes, I am talking about Dr. Sumit Chaturvedi. Dr. Sumit Chaturvedi has over 15 years long experience in research, teaching, and extension education in the field of agronomy and agroforestry. He is presently working as Associate Professor in the Department of Agronomy, G.V. Pant University of Agriculture and Technology, Pantnagar. Presently, he is associated with about 14 research projects from different government and non-government agencies. Notable among them are designing controlled release fertilizer utilizing agri-waste biochar funded by National Innovations on Climate Resilient Agriculture ICAR, All India Coordinated Research Project, Integrated Farming System, and All India Coordinated Research Project on Agroforestry. He has more than 70 research papers in different journals of national and international repute, 6 books, proceedings, 6 teaching manual technical bulletins, 30 book chapter, and 16 popular articles. He has guided 2 PhD students, more than 13 MSc research scholars as an advisor, and more than 20 students as co-advisor. He has various awards and honors to his credits. He also holds administrative positions such as Nodal Officer, ICR Cell, Assistant Coordinator Planning and Technical Cell, Vice Chancellor Office, GBPAT, Pantnagar. Thank you, sir. Sir, now over to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Am I audible?
Welcome, Dr. Sumit.
Sir, pranam.
Yes, you are audible. Welcome. Pranam, pranam. कैसे हो?
So very nice seeing you all, sir, there and leading from the front.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's
We are
very happy
leader.
to see you, sir. After long time.
Thank you, thank you. Proceed,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Sumit.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. First of all, I would like to thank our very senior Dr. D.K. Singh and even Dr. Pandyaraj, who was one of my student. He did a PhD with me, and I'm really thankful that this opportunity came to me to speak before some of the audience from my alma mater. I did my graduation from the institution, and my father was there, so my liking for that institution is very much, and I'm really thankful to the organizers that this opportunity was given to me. So let me share my presentation.
Yes, sir.
And,
Yes,
You go ahead, Sumit.
yes, thank you. Okay, Pandyaraj,
Yes, sir.
nice to see you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Organizing such a wonderful conference, and I think you are leading it from the front. It's very good. Nice to see students rising. And so let me start with my talk. Briefly, I will introduce my talk that I will be speaking on crop residue biochar for climate resilient agriculture. So basically, this talk of mine, I think mostly is students are there as an audience, or some faculties.
All faculty, students, research scholars, everyone there.
So my talk will be basically on 2 aspects. That is, first of all, I will be talking on some aspects of climate change. What actually the climate change is and why we need in today's scenario the climate resilient management, or let us say climate resilient technologies. And one of the very potent climate resilient technology that I will be talking in this lecture is converting crop residues into a very useful product that is known as biochar. And it is a very innovative product, and I got one project from NICRA, that is National Innovation on Climate Resilient Agriculture, Hyderabad. and I got chance to work on this aspect, and I got very beautiful results on field. So I will be sharing some of these experiences in this talk. Um, so let me proceed. Okay, I think this is a very classical graph, and most of some of you might have seen also. I have taken it from FAO literature. Um, uh, this is a very critical graph in the sense that it tells that what challenge in regard to food production we have in future. Um, the statement that is written on the top says that we need to produce more food in next 50 years than what we have produced in all of our human history. Means right from the beginning when the agriculture actually started up to now, if we sum all the production of all the years throughout the world, the production that we have made up to now, in next 50 years we have to produce more than that, and it is a big challenge, and it is the challenge that we all agricultural scientists or plant scientists are striving for, that we need food security across the world, and it is mainly because of rising population, and we know that we are growing very fastly, and mostly this pace of growth in population is more in developing countries, Southeast Asian countries like China, India. They are growing much faster as compared to developed nations. So how to tackle these in these regions? So we have more responsibility as compared to Western world as far as the food security is concerned. The second most important challenge that agriculturists are facing is declining arable land. It is again a big challenge, and that per capita land availability is decreasing day by day. It is not only because of let us say increase in population, but also diversion of some of the agricultural lands to other purposes. So that is a dual challenge. Means on a less land we have to produce more. This graph actually shows the amount of food that we will need, or we produced in the form of calorie. So from 1500 to 2000, in last 500 years, we have produced around 677 exacal of calories of food has been produced by humans. And in next 50 years, that is from 2010 to let us say 2050, we need to produce 730 exacal of food. Means that is more as compared to what we have produced up to now. One golden or let us silver lining in this is that majority of our food population is now means are dependent more and more on animal diet. So this provides some relaxation to us that now that diet is rich in calorie, animal based diet are rich in calorie, and more population are now diverting towards the animal based diet. So there is small scope of let us say relaxation as far as food security is concerned. So this is the major challenge that we need to address as far as the agriculture is concerned. And this is again a very good graph which shows that in India we have done very nicely up to now. Since the Green Revolution, our productivity per unit of land has been increasing. It's very good sign, and it is mainly because of the introduction of new cultivars, high-yielding cultivars, hybrids, which were more responsive to production technologies. And not only the new varieties, but because of the good management practices that we introduced into the fields, our yield levels constantly increased. But in future, if we want to meet out the food security, we cannot move with the same direction. if we keep on moving in the same direction, we will be reaching somewhere 2.5 tons per hectare of yields up to 2050. That will not be enough to meet our food requirement. Apart from that, it will be more challenged by more number of diseases. It will be more challenged by decreased water resources, decreased nutrient resources, decreased energy into the, let us say, agriculture. And above all, it will be challenged by the changing climatic pattern. And that changing climatic pattern will not only directly impact the yield levels of our crops on the field, but it will also impact the resources, the resource availability into the agriculture. So if all these challenges are taken into consideration, then we can say that our yield levels might decrease below 2 tons per hectare if we do not, let us say, address nicely the challenge of climate change. So we need to develop such technologies or such cultivars which are more adaptive to climate change or changing pattern of climate. So that is a challenge, that we need to now produce more, or even our growth rate needs to be increased even more. We need to produce even on less land, less nutrients, less water, with lot of, let us say, aberrations, or let us say fragility in the future. So that is the major challenge for let us say food security challenge in the future for agriculture. So let us understand what actually the climate change is. If you talk of climate change, then there are two words that actually come across literature, and that is, one is climate variability, and many people say that climates are changing and it is natural that it change. It will not be same across the years, or let us say across the regions. Actually, I want to clarify here that climate change that we are talking of is not the natural changes that is happening into the climate, or climatic variables, or let us say weather variables. The change that we are talking is basically that is human induced, means that is induced or that has been attributed directly or indirectly by the human activities. The development that we are forcing, it is leading to that changes, and the changes that might have occurred naturally, it is speeding that changes. Means those changes which would have occurred in 100 years are now are occurring in 10 years only. So that changes in the climate variability we are concerned about, and it is mainly the change that we talk in the term that is climate change. So I think you might be very clear now that climate change we are talking is human induced changes in the climate events, means forced changes. So if you want to understand it mathematically, or let us say more clearly, the climate change, we can say that climate is a manifestation in terms of weather variables. And if this weather variables changes, let us say mean weather variables changes. Let us say if there is more records of hotter events, then we will call a climate change. Means a whole climate has shifted towards a newer climate. So that will be called as climate change. If there is more variability in the climate or weather variables increases, then also we will call it as a climate change. There is more record of hot weather, there is more record of cold weather, and there is more hot and cold weathers. Then also we will call it as climate change. And if both mean and variance change, then means there is much more hot weathers and there is more records of hot weathers, then also we will call it as climate change. So what is happening is that both mean is changing, not only mean is changing, but the variability is also changing, and it is shifting towards a hotter climate. This is again a very classical graph Most of you might have seen this. That is, our global mean temperature is increasing. And global mean temperature across the world has increased to around 0.85, and some reason it is around 1 degree Celsius since 1860. So it is very alarming. Very alarming in the sense, the point to notice in this graph is that different lines that I have shown, that if you see the red line, that is the slope of line is not so steep and it is increasing, but the steepness is less than the orange line or yellow line or purple line. So if you see last 150 years since Industrial Revolution, the temperature has increased at a rate of 0.05 degrees Celsius per decade. But if you average it in last 100 years, that is purple line, it has increased at a rate of 0.074 degrees Celsius per decade. Likewise, yellow line, last 25 years, you can see that it is becoming more steep, more steep, more steep. So it has increased at a rate of, let us say, 0.17 degrees Celsius per decade. So that is a very alarming situation, that even rise in temperature is now rising at a rapid rate. Means the rate of increase is also increasing. So means we are not able to address the issue sufficiently to tackle the, let us say, issue of climate change mitigation is concerned. As far as the mitigation is concerned, that is actually the major cause of concern. And if we see that warmest 16 years in last century has been in last 16 years only. So you can say that consequently these warm years are now rising, and every year new records are we are achieving. Even this year we are noticing that summers have come even earlier as compared to the earlier years. This is again some of the graphs showing how a pattern of climate across the globe, and how three different culprits, that is the major gases which are responsible for, let us say, global warming, and that is actually responsible for increase in temperature in our globe, is very positively, very highly correlated with each other. If we see that how these concentration of these gases varied in last 100 years or in 1000 years, last 1000 years in our atmosphere, we can say that these graphs of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have matched the rise in temperature in our globe exactly. So we can say that whatsoever rise in temperature or mean global temperature is happening, it is mainly happening because of the increase in concentration of these three gases, basically greenhouse gases, that is carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Again, some of the impacts that we observe across the globes, that this is mean temperature, there is rise, even decadal temperature. We can say that if we average it over the decades, the decadal temperature is rising. Means average decade temperature is on the rise. Every time it is increasing. Ice belts, or let us say glaciers, are receding, and there is recedes in glaciers. And there is sea level rise. We are saying that some of the inundation of so the coastal regions. This is some of the, let us say, projected images, how we will find a surface temperature to vary in future, and how the precipitation will vary. So precipitation in some regions will increase, but that will become more, let us say, erratic. It will not be uniform. Even in the regions, there will be large number of regions near the equator which will be drier as compared to the today, and in some regions will be more wet, but that wetness will be not uniform. That will be erratic, and it will even lead to some extreme events like floods, and will even cause a lot of damage to agriculture. So we can, what conclusions we can draw from the few slides that we have seen, and that climate is changing and it will continue to do so. But the the point of worry is that the pattern is not same. The pattern is also changing. So we need to understand that pattern also in order to address this issue of climate change. What is the very concern is that whatsoever changes are happening, it is going to negatively impact our life support system. In a cumulative way, if we observe it, it is going to negatively impact our life support system. Extreme events such as drought, floods, cloud burst, cyclone, rising temperature, they all are now being recorded every year, and it has become, let us say, a normal feature in a year that you observe some of the events in one of the other regions. And these events are not occurring frequently. They are not. They are becoming more intense. Every time we see that more damage are being caused by these events, and they are also becoming more extensive. So these are the some of the concerns that we need to address in agriculture also, as well as the climate changes concerned. This is again very classical graph, and I think you all might be you might have seen this and studied, and it is very simple graph. What is the major phenomena of let us say rise in temperature of our atmosphere, and this is known as greenhouse effect, and I need not to go in detail in this. And this greenhouse effect is mainly caused by these gases. The culprit gases are carbon dioxide, methane, carbon chlorofluorocarbons, nitrous oxide, and some of the oxides of, let us say, ozone layer, water vapor, nitrous carbon monoxides. And these also cause, to some extent, the greenhouse effect. But the major culprit is carbon dioxide, followed by methane. And as far as the agriculture is concerned, nitrous oxide also is a major culprit to cause this greenhouse effect into the atmosphere. This is some of the patterns how these three gases, along with chlorofluorocarbons, how they have actually increased in concentration into the atmosphere since pre-industrial atmospheric concentration to a current concentration. So we can see that 41% carbon dioxide have increased, methane has increased to 170%, 170%. Methane has increased. Nitrous oxide 20% has increased. Chlorofluorocarbons was not there in pre-industrial era, but now it has increased in its concentration. So what we can say that they are increasing at a rapid rate. Even annual increment rate, if we can see that, and it is around 1% in methane, around 0.5% in carbon dioxide, around 1/4% in nitrous oxide. So it is increasing at a rapid rate. So that is actually need to address. And one thing that we need to let us say understand is that one molecule of let us say carbon dioxide potential is, if it is 1, then methane potential is 20 to 30 times more as compared to carbon dioxide. So what we can say that one molecule of, or let us say one molecule of methane in the atmosphere will be causing 20, will be equivalent to 20 to 30 molecules of carbon dioxide. So we need to address the release of this methane and nitrous oxide also into the atmosphere, because they are more potent. Their radiative force is more as compared to carbon dioxide. So you can see that nitrous oxide, its radiative force is much higher. That is 310 times. So one molecule release of nitrous oxide will be equivalent to 310 molecules of carbon dioxide. So it is, let us say, very much more potent. And as far as agriculture is concerned, mostly the carbon dioxide from agricultural source is a natural release from the soil, and let us say from the system, land use changes. But this methane and nitrous oxide, to somewhat extent, it is mainly because of the practices that we follow in our agricultural system. The release of these can be addressed to some extent. This is again a scenario of the world. We are, let us say, if we consider different regions of the world, and after China, United States, and European Union, we are at the 4th position as far as the release of these greenhouse gases are concerned. However, we are contributing around 6% to the total global annual emissions. And the developed regions like China and USA, European Union, they are contributing much more as compared to India. But again, anyone releases, it will be impacting everyone. So collectively, we need to address this issue of, let us say, release of, let us say, greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Whatsoever we can do on our part, we have to do it. And I think the many international consortiums has been made, and those consortiums are working together in one platform, and India is also a part of that consortium. If we talk of an agriculture and greenhouse gases, then we can say that we are not only sufferers. Let us say whatsoever changes are happening and agriculture is being negatively impacted, it is not only one case. And another case is that we are also contributing to the changing climate, what is happening. Means, and significantly we are contributing. And that is, if we take holistically, then agriculture is responsible for 30% of the total greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere. Out of this 30, 16 or 15 to 16%. So 15% of this release from the agriculture sector is direct, and 15% is indirect. So in this graph, we can see that agriculture, you can see that 16% is emission from the agriculture, and other you can see that 73% from energy and other sectors. But this 16% is direct emission. And this direct emission, if we see different, let us say, management within agriculture, then we can see that enteric fermentation means that rearing of cattle, that we are doing it in our agriculture, that will be included in our agriculture. That is the major culprit, and it is responsible for 54% of the release of greenhouse gases, and mainly methane is being major gas that is being released from these reasons. Agricultural soils, 19%, it is mainly includes both methane as well as nitrous oxide. Rice cultivation, that is directly related to us, is again 18% contributor in agriculture. Manure management, that is again related to us, is 7%. And residue burning that we are addressing in this conference, that is only responsible for 2% of the total emission from agriculture into the atmosphere. So although this percentage does not look much as far as the contribution is concerned, but again, it is again posing a lot of threats in different regions. As we have heard that in the Delhi regions, a lot of asthmatic problems, and let us say problems in visibility, respiratory diseases are coming up. So means region-specific problems are arising, and in some of the time frames of the year, that is when rice residues are being burned during the month of October and November, then a lot of problems are being posed in that regions. So again, it is a cause of concern in some of the regions, but holistically, we see that only 2% is being contributed by field burning of, let us say, agricultural residues. So we need to, however, we need to address others release, that is from agricultural soils, from rice cultivation, manure management, that also we can tackle it as in plant scientists or agriculturists. Again, being a part of, let us say, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and let us say World Forum, we need to monitor our, let us say, release pattern from all across the sectors. If we see that it is, let us say, world release, here agriculture are two. Methane, in methane agriculture is there, in nitrous oxide agriculture is there. So this dark pink color release pattern is, let us say, release of nitrous oxide from agriculture. It is mainly from, this nitrous oxide is mainly from agriculture. You can see that 80% of the total nitrous oxide is being emitted from agriculture. And if you see the methane emission, then methane emission, you see this a significant amount, around 50% of the methane emission is again from agriculture. So these two gases are very important as far as the release of greenhouse gases from agriculture. Basically, crop management or crop-based management is concerned, and this methane as well as nitrous oxide emission is concerned. So we are also contributing much in carbon dioxide, but that is not significant. That is much higher in other sectors. And whatsoever carbon release is there from agriculture is through a natural phenomenon. It's considered a natural phenomenon. This is some of the footprints of carbon of different food products that we produce in agriculture, and we can see that if when we move from let us say vegetarian diets to non-vegetarian diets, the footprints increases. There is much more footprint of per kg of goat meat as compared to per kg of rice, or not rice, but rice is also low. But vegetables, if you see, potato, tomato, broccoli, means those vegetables per kg of carbon release is much lower as compared to meat-based diets. So that also we need to take into consideration, because a lot of diet is now being shifted towards animal-based diets. So if we are increasing productivity or we are diverting more area towards animal, let us say, based rearing or food consumption, then also we are increasing the footprints. So we need to let us say optimize different sectors of agriculture, seeing their footprints also of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Again, what I said, that the consortium, that is Worldwide Consortium, we are part of that, and it is constantly working. And our country is a part of that, and the Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change. So all these are monitoring this issue of climate change all world across, and we are a party to it. We are party to it. India, being a party to it, has to oblige, or let us say, has to follow the instructions, or let us say rules that are being formulated under these platforms. And we are doing it because we are partner. And if we can see that there is annual reports, a lot of annual reports that are annually being published by Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And these assessment reports are basically monitoring the release pattern of greenhouse gas all across the world. And India also, through different, let us say, reports that are coming from the Ministry of Environment and Forest earlier, and now Environment, Forest and Climate Change. They are releasing their annual reports annually. You can go through those also. So being a party to it, we are also bound to reduce our, let us say, emissions by 35% of 2005 release. Means whatsoever was being released in 2005, we need to cut it by 35% by following, or by, let us say, adopting the technologies which are more climate friendly or eco-friendly. For that, our prime ministers have initiated a national action plan on climate change, and a lot of different missions, national missions, have been launched across the world, across the country. That is National Solar Mission, National Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency, National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, National Water Mission, National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture, and National Mission on Strategic Knowledge on Climate Change, National Mission on Sustaining Himalayan Ecosystem. So means all those missions have been launched mainly with the objective of addressing one issue, that is the issue of climate change. And as far as the agriculture is concerned, there is one program that is running there, that is NICRA, that is National Innovations in Climate Resilient Agriculture, and it is running across the 41 ICR institutes, 46 universities, and in universities it is basically being operated in KVKs. So it is covering a lot of regions, means right from north to south to east to west. All the portions are being covered, and now it is monitoring the emissions rate from different, let us say, sectors, and compiling it and giving it to, let us say, ministry for their reports. So means what I mean to say that since 11, this body NICRA is contributing, or let us say keeping the balance sheets of this greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture sector. Again, if we see that climate change and India, they have speculated that a lot of changes are projected in the future, and mainly because we have diverse climate across the regions. We have very large coastlines, which is making us more prone to changing climatic patterns. We are basically, our agriculture is rain-fed. That also make more vulnerable, our country more vulnerable to, or our agriculture more vulnerable to, let us say, changing climatic pattern. Our farmers are very small, and they have less capacity to, let us say, bear losses and in their production activities. And so their coping mechanism is different as far as Western world is concerned. And there is a rise, even in Indian regions, there is even rise in extreme events. We are seeing that a lot of damage is now being caused by different extreme events. So we need to not only adopt, but also to address or mitigate the changing climate. Let us the release of, we need to reduce the emissions rate from agriculture also, as far as mitigation is concerned. This is one graph showing that how throughout the since 2000, you can say that every year there is one or the other extreme event occurring in one or the other regions. So these are some of the, let us say, indicator that now the changes have occurred, and we are now observing its heat across the different regions of the country. Again, lot of literature of news you can see in different publications or news articles regarding drought events, flood events, is everywhere. You can see that simultaneously flood events, I can see that every year it is there. 2013, 16, 14, 12, means every year it is now a constant phenomena. One or the other reasons it is now coming. Even the more dangerous is that those reasons which were used to were used to receive very less rainfall, now are means floods are occurring in those regions of Gujarat and Rajasthan. They are now means floods are coming. They are causing a lot of damage, a lot of erosion, soil erosion problem. So it is a lot of concern. Again, this is an IPCC mapping, and you can see that India is in red and orange zone. So more than 15 regions in southern regions, and in upper northern regions, you can see that around 25% reduction in crop yields are simulated. So it is means great concern, and we need to adopt very hurriedly as far as climate is concerned. This was my first portion. I think it was okay to you, audience. So let us now proceed. Once we have understood the climate change and how agriculture is now being impacted, so we need to develop a technology which not only adopt agriculture in a better way, but also is more, let us say, have more mitigation potential. So we can say that climate resilient agriculture is an answer to all those problems that has been, let us posed by changing climatic pattern. What we actually mean by climate resilient is that those technologies which not only increase the productivity or income of a farmer, but it is more resilient, or let us say it is more adaptive to variability, and it also reduces the emissions from the, let us say, greenhouse gases from agriculture, and it has more carbon storage potential into the soil, Means in a way it is mitigating the release of, let us say, or change in climatic pattern, or there is less release of greenhouse gas, and there is more adaptability, and there is more productivity. If these three things a practice um, can be, let us say, fulfills, then that technology we will call it as climate resilient agriculture, and that can also, we can also call it as climate smart agriculture. So there can be many examples for that. Many technologies can be there for that. Conservation agriculture, the last lecture Dr. H.K. Rai has explained, and Dr. D.K. Singh is one of my colleagues here and senior to me, also explained to you how we can proceed with conservation agriculture. So agroforestry is another technology that is very climate resilient, we can say that. And one is that is integrated farming system. It is again a very good technology, and it is being now promoted across the country. That our traditional, or let us say basically the smallholders, they can adopt to this integrated farming system and earn more, produce more from the per unit of land, and at the same time it is more resilient in the sense that even if one enterprise is impacted by the, let us say, extreme events, they can earn some, let us say, profits from the other enterprise, and it is cumulative. If the resources are being managed efficiently in the integrated farming system, then we can say that we can save a lot of resources. Means if we go for multiple utilization of water, if we go for, let us say, recycling of residues and, let us say, animal waste into the crop and animal component, and then through these complementary enterprises in the integrated farming system, we can improve upon the efficiency and reduce its footprints towards the climate. So these three technologies I see very climate resilient as far as climate smart agriculture or climate resilient agriculture is concerned. Apart from these, some small technologies which I will be focusing basically in this lecture in the next phase, that is biochar based. If we are able to manage the residues that are being produced in our fields by converting into as useful products like biochar, and then I think that technology can be intermingled, or let us say can be incorporated in any of these technologies, that is agroforestry, conservation agriculture, or integrated farming system, and can make even these systems more efficient towards climate. Yeah, this is a scenario of agriculture. These residues, that is crop residues that are being generated in our country. So around 686 million tons of crop residues per year is being generated. And if we categorize by different category of crops, and basically the cereals, 70% of crop residues, and it is being shared by, let us say, small portions to other crops. Cereals are the major, let us say, major share. They have major share to crop residue. And if we see even in the cereals, rice residue and wheat residues are very problematic. And this rice residue 34% and wheat residue 22%, very less is being utilized. So rice residue, I think very less. Some of the hilly regions also they go for utilization of this rice residue. Otherwise, it is being burned on field right now. But due to the promotion of conservation, although the adaptation is very less at the field level, but they are going for this management of residue by keeping it on the surface, or it is incorporating into the soil. But the adaptation is still at a minor level in the fields. Wheat residues find its place into different utilizations. In many regions, rain-fed regions, it is a good bed for animal, let us say, fodder. So in rain-fed regions, it is totally going for as animal feed. But in some of the irrigated regions, again, it find its place and utilization in some of the industries, some of the, let us say, scarce regions of water, they purchase it. And so the farmer can sell their wheat residues. So they do not have much problem with the wheat residues, but the rice residue is very problematic. This is again a scenario state-wise. So these three states, that is UP, Western UP, that is we call Haryana and Punjab. They are the major generator of this rice residues and wheat residues, and where actually this burning problem is coming up. This is some of the satellite that are being used to monitor under that project NICRA, and these monitor basically the burning process that is happening in this northwestern region, that is Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, Eastern UP. So what actually is a good sign is that if we monitor, of let us say if we see the trend of burning in last 3 years, and that the policies and other things that the government is floating across the regions have means it is coming in a positive way. That is, if we see the emissions, that it is constantly on the decline. You can see the three graphs. That is in all the regions. That is UP, Haryana, and Punjab. Since 2016 to 2018, and there is a constant decline in burning events. So it is a positive sign that now farmers and stakeholders are now becoming more, let us say, means they are more concerned, and they know this problem of burning, and they are being told by different stakeholders that there are a lot of problems if you burn the residues, and a lot of technologies, burning free technologies are now being promoted into different regions. How to decompose it into the fields in a faster manner, how to remove it and utilize it to in different industries, even how to keep it on the surface and manage the crops. These technologies are being promoted, and means some positive indication is coming that they are now being somewhat extent it is being adopted by the farmers also in the fields. Residue management issue is that wheat residue we can manage as a powder, but rice residue, because of the rich of lignin and low in protein, it is not being preferred by livestock, and it also creates a lot of problem when we go for let us say a lot of residues are generated. Rice residue, there is a lot of residue, and it poses a lot of problem when we go for no-till, let us say wheat crop or other crop. It interferes with the operations of let us say this equipment, zero-till seed drills. So farmer prefers to burn it. Loose residues, they pose a lot of problems, so farmer prefers to burn it. But while burning, 1 tons of straw releases 3 kg of particulate matter, 60 kg of carbon monoxide, 50 around 1500 kg of carbon dioxide, 199 kg of ash, and 2 kg of sulfur dioxide. So a lot of pollution in or let us say release of greenhouse gases is there. Even some methane is being released when we are going for burning. And there is also loss of organic matter and nutrients. Air pollution is there, reduced. Even there is reports that static reports that there is a reduction in herbicide efficacy when we go for let us say burning of these residues. So this is again a major problem in Punjab region, that is 90% of the total rice residues that has been produced is being burned. So one alternative with us is that we can convert this rice residue basically into very useful product that is known as biochar, and we can use it as a soil amendment and enrich the soil by not only manipulating different soil properties in favor of crop growth, but also increase the sequestration of carbon into the soil, and we can lock the soil lock the carbon into the soil for, let us say, thousands of years, and in a way we can sequester the carbon into the soil, and we can negatively क्या कहते हैं, guide the flow of carbon from atmosphere into the soil. So if we need to understand what actually the carbon biochar is, then biochar is a carbon-rich charcoal-like substances that is created by heating of biomass in a low oxygen, or it is a no oxygen condition. And that process of heating in a no oxygen or low oxygen condition is known as pyrolysis. So any biomass which is subjected to pyrolysis will lead biochar as one of its product, and that biochar can be designed in a suitable manner so that it has a maximum beneficial impact when it is applied back into the soil. So it is some kind of engineered material, and that we get when we guide our this biomass through pyrolysis. And the idea about this biochar actually was originated in Amazon region in America, where you can find a lot of black patches around the Amazon regions. And those black patches have actually developed because of the slow pyrolysis that happened because of the decomposition of, let us say, these biomass buried into the soil surfaces. And if you grow crop in those regions, in black patches, and the growth is very good in those regions, vegetation is very good, apart from their adjoining regions where the black patches are not there. So the idea of all the research that actually originate from there only, that is known as Terra Preta. Terra Preta, and the scientist which actually discovered it was Wim Sommer. And this is there traditionally it was known as slash and smolder technique, being adopted in Amazon regions. So idea of biochar actually originated in that region. Any raw material we can utilize it for let us say biochar production, and let us say all the waste material from agriculture, one or the other way fits very nicely for the biochar production. So this is the way that we produce biochar. We in the pyrolysis chamber we insert the biomass, and three products are being obtained while pyrolysis. Pyrolysis 50%. This 50% and 50% is a generalized statement, but based on the temperature of pyrolysis, and the quantity of these three outputs varies. And this is a solid output that is in terms of biochar, and there is one gas output that is in the form of producer gas or syngas or biohydrogen, we can say that, and there is one liquid product that is bio oil. And so these bio oil and syngas can be utilized as a source of energy or a combined source of heat for generation of power in any sector, that is sector of energy, transport, products, industry. And this 50% biochar as a solid product can again be recycled back into the soil, or it can be converted into some composite, some form of composites to lock the carbon for a long period, and even we can say that to sequester the carbon into the system. So this is the basics that based on the temperature and the product distribution or weight distribution of product varies. There are three products, that is gas, liquid, and solid. And based on the pyrolysis temperature, means torrefaction is low pyrolysis, low temperature pyrolysis, slow pyrolysis, then slow pyrolysis carbonization, then fast pyrolysis, then gasification. It's at a very high temperature if you go for let us say burning of residues in lack of oxygen. And then the percentage of these three products varies. You can see that. So we can see that in agriculture, if we go for this slow pyrolysis and get around 30% of, let us say, solid fraction in the form of biochar, and utilize it again in the form of, let us say, as a soil amendment, it is very good for it, and we can utilize gas and liquid bio that is produced in the form of energy. This is the pyrolysis chamber that we produced at our laboratory scale for field scale production of biochar. This is a drum with cast iron, and here from the, let us say, from the top we load biomass into it, chopped biomass into it, and flow the air through this pipe. There is a pipe for the flow of limited flow of air into the chamber for some time only. That is 30 to 45 minutes. We go for the flow of air, guided air into it, and then once the combustion started inside the chamber, we lock it from the top as well as from this their top, and such fumes are being produced. Uh, in this unit, we do not have a unit to capture these fumes, but again, we can capture it. We can capture these fumes for, let us say, utilization in some energy. It has some energy utilization. So we can capture this also. We can capture the liquid also, which is produced during this process. But this unit does not have these units combined with it. We have to turn it, and after, let us say, 5 to 6 hours, we get this kind of product. Black जो आप product देख रहे हैं, ये product हमको मिलता है, and this product is actually what we call it as biochar. It is biochar. If we go for a detailed description or it is a characterization, it is a very stable product. And as we go on increasing the pyrolysis temperature, that is means a biochar made at 400 degrees Celsius, it will have some this amorphous carbon structure. If we go for at 800 degrees Celsius, then it will have around turbostatic carbon structure. Likewise, if we go on increasing the temperature up to 2500 degrees Celsius, it will have a graphite-like structure, or this graphene ring-like structure. A ring will be formed. It will become very aromatic, very resistant, very means stable product, as far as stable as graphite, as stable as diamond. It will be there. So we need a structure like this in the middle, and it is stable also. It can retain into the soil for thousands of years and have its beneficial impact. Second, it provides spatial separation of decomposers. Means the pore spaces that are there inside the biochar. This is the electron microscopy image. You can see that a lot of pore spaces are there, and those pore spaces can be habitat, can be a very good habitat for microorganisms. They are very good habitat for microorganisms, and microorganisms actually proliferate in these macropores. And they act as a means एक तरह से घर उनका हो जाता है, and provides very congenial environment to them, and they proliferate under these pore spaces. Mycorrhiza also grow very nicely in the pore spaces, or hypha of these mycorrhiza grow very nicely and proliferate under the biochar. It also have some interaction with mineral, let us say, organo mineral complexes it forms with some of the heavy metals and metallic cations, and like silicate clays also. It also absorb, let us say, heavy metals and metallic cations on its surface. At molecular level, we can see that biomass is made up of cellulose and lignin. And when we go for, let us say, heating or thermochemical treatment is there, then rearrangement of these lignin and cellulose molecules takes place, and they get arranged into like this structure. So this structure is a very stable structure, as a ring-like structures are of carbon is being formed, and it has lot of charges on its surface. These charges are carboxylic group, aldehyde, ketones, even hydroxyl groups are there, where hydrogen bondings can happen. Even some hydrogen ions are there, which will be able to absorb some of the negative anions from the, let us say, soil. And so all these carboxylic charges, these negative or this is charges on the surface, and this arrangement and the pore spaces, all three factors of biochar play a very positive role when it is mixed into the soil, and it has a very positive role as far as soil properties in favor of plant growth is concerned. This is approximate. This is the composition of biochar. Um, is average composition. You can say that carbon varies from 50 to 90%. Means it is basically a carbon product. Um, Mineral is 0.5 to 5%. So whatsoever minerals are there in the biomass, they will be retaining inside the biochar also. Moisture is 1 to 15% based on the temperature in which it is being made. And the volatile component, we can say that the gases that are being released, basically in form of tars and as well as different producer gas, it is 0 to 40%. Based on temperatures in which this property or this proportion of this, let us say, the components will vary based on the temperature or and the feedstock. Again, the properties which is in relation to agriculture or soil amendment is very important. We can see that if we vary the temperature, pyrolysis temperature, the pH goes on increasing. Surface area increases very speedily at 500 degrees Celsius, around 500 degrees Celsius. CC also increases as we go on increasing, and at around 500 to 600 degrees Celsius, it is having very high CC. And as far as the carbon recovery is concerned, as we increase the temperature, the carbon recovery diminishes. But because of the favor of this surface area, pH, and CC, we choose to manufacture our biomass, or let us say biochar, at this particular pyrolysis temperature. So based on your utilization of biochar, you can actually re-engineer it by varying the pyrolysis temperature. Again, these are some of the properties based on feedstock, how it varies. Bioculture benefits. I have already said that it reclaims the degraded soils and heavy metal remediation. It plays very important role. It plays very important role for the reclamation of degraded soils. It helps in water conservation because of its very low bulk density. It has a bulk density of around 0.2, 0.3, and it has around particle density of 1.5, 1.6. So it can retain around 8 to 10 times moisture in it in accordance to its weight. So it has very good moisture holding capacity, and it increases the moisture holding capacity of soil whenever it is added into the soil. Recycling तो अच्छी होती है. Microbial activities को it totally change the microbial activities of the soil, and means by affecting many different phenomena, or it is a process of soil, it impact the microbial activities. It also affect the pH and availability of different anions, that is phosphorus, to the plant. It increases the crop yields. It lessens the impact of hazardous pesticide pollution. So it absorb most of the hazardous cations and let us say pesticides on its surface. So it reduces its hazardous effect. Even if it's leaching into the groundwater is reduced. So it also helps in bioremediation in a way. And in the middle, we can see that it addresses the climate change issue, that it reduces the emissions of greenhouse gases basically from the rice fields, and it increase the carbon sequestration into the soil. These are some of the soil functions that it play very importantly. So microbial habitat, bulk density, most of the things that we have talked earlier also. This is a complex graph. You might be seeing that. This generally shows that how biochar impact the microbial activity. So it manipulates the microbial community in a favorable manner that it positively or promote the plant growth. So outside boxes, you can say that the impact that it is having in a soil plant system, and how these changes happens. Is the inner circle graph that you can observe that biochar interact with the microbe in these seven principles. That is, first it act as a habitat. pore structure act as a habitat for microbes. Secondly, it absorbs cations and anions on its surface, and these anions or cations has a sustained release of nutrients and nutrient supply for the growth of microbes. The free radicals and volatile organic carbons on the surface of the biochar, are toxic to some of the pathogens, and it reduces the population of pathogen into the soil, thereby promoting the plant growth and thereby promoting the elemental, or let us say soil elemental cycles and other things. It also improves the soil properties like pH, water holding capacity, reduces the bird density. So thereby it improves the or proliferate the microbial population. It also influences the enzymatic activities, means some of the enzymes activities are improved, some enzyme activities are reduced. So accordingly, it favors some of the elemental cycles. Basically, the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles are enhanced. So organic mineralization, organic N mineralization, organic P mineralization is enhanced by biochar activity. It also plays an important role for signaling molecules. So some of the signaling molecules are being adsorbed on its surfaces, and that act to proliferate the microbial community. It also absorb, as I told earlier, also that some heavy metal and soil contaminants are being absorbed on the surface of the biochar, and that facilitate microbial contaminant degradation and heavy metal transformation. So in this manner, it plays a very important role managing the microbial population, or let us say managing the microbial community in a favorable direction in regards to plant growth. This is again a very good graph showing that how alkaline phosphatase. You can see that when you go for application of biochar, there is enhanced or increased alkaline phosphatase activities. There is somewhat increase in L-leucine aminopeptidase activities, but there is reduction in cellulobiosidase and glucosidase. So it shows that those microorganisms which are actually responsible for carbon mineralization, their activity is reduced. But those which are responsible for, let us say, a nitrogen mineralization and phosphate, organic phosphate mineralization, their activity is enhanced. So N cycle and P cycle in the soil is enhanced, and carbon cycle is reduced. So carbon cycle, it sequesters more and enhance the nutrient cycle. Again, this is a picture that I have told earlier also, how it plays important role. This is some of the impact across the different regions that it acts as a liming agent, because there is increase in pH. It has some higher pH. So those regions where the pH is very low, you can go for the application of this biochar. Fertilizer efficiency is enhanced. Cation exchange capacity is 50% increase there. So in most of the factors, soil properties, and they are increased when you go for the application of biochar into the soil. And there is reduction in methane emission, 100% decrease in methane emission from the rice field is observed when you go for this biochar application. This is again a very classical, in the last line I told that biological nitrogen fixation is increased. So they proved it. Rondon and his co-workers worked in 2017, and they take two mutant, that is nitrogen fixing mutant of common bean and non-nitrogen fixing. So you can see that when we go for increased application of biochar, that is 0, that is 30 ppm, not ppm, that 30 gram per kg, that is 60 gram, that is 90 gram per kg. So when we go for increased application up to 90 gram, 60 gram, the nitrogen fixation increased. But here in non-nitrogen fixing, it does not increase much. So we can say that in nitrogen fixing, it is impacting some of the atmospheric nitrogen fixation from the atmosphere in a nitrogen fixing strain. Here in third graph, you can see that the dark one is that nitrogen fixation from atmosphere, and in light gray color is nitrogen fixation from soil. So you can see that a major increase due to addition of biochar is in nitrogen fixation from atmosphere. So biological nitrogen fixation is enhanced when we go for the application of biochar. In a way, it favors the growth of, let us say, nodulation and rhizobium bacteria or biota into the um, plant soil system. So biochar cycle, if we follow instead of natural carbon cycle, then it is a carbon neutral way of cycling. But if we adopt a biochar cycle of carbon, then we can say that a lot of carbon, 50% of carbon, we can lock it back into the into our system. So this is, we can say that it is a carbon negative cycling of carbon into the our system, and in a way where carbon dioxide level is increasing constantly into the atmosphere, that is major culprit for global warming. And we can bring back some of the carbon from the let us say atmosphere and lock it into the soil. Again, this is Lehman. He has worked. He's a known figure across the globe, and he said that if you go for biochar application into the soil, and if you go for organic matter application, or say straw or any manure application into the soil, the soil C content will increase initially, but after some time it will get plateaued. If you go for application of plant residues, manure, and compost, so rate of mineralization, rate of addition will be same after some time. So decomposition input rate will be same. But when we go for application of biochar, you can increase the soil carbon content to a, let us say, indefinite level, and there is a huge potential of storing carbon into the soil when you adopt this process of biochar addition into the soil. It is mainly because of this process, that is decomposition rate is much lower as compared to the input, and it also has a priming, negative priming effect on soil organic carbon. Negative priming effect means it also lowers the decomposition rate of, that is the soil organic carbon that I had discussed earlier also. So in both the way, it increases the soil carbon concentration in the soil. Even if you are adding it with organic matter, then it can be more beneficial because it will slow down its decomposition rate. So the problem of rapid decomposition and immobilization of some of the nutrients will be solved when you are going for, let's say, mixture addition of biochar and organic matter into the soil. This is again a very good graph how the carbon flux of carbon dioxide and methane flux varies if you go for let us say without biochar addition in the rice fields, and if with biochar addition in rice fields. If you adopt let us say biochar cycle or biochar system in the rice fields, you can see that the emission of carbon dioxide, methane is reduced, much more reduced. Here methane emission is 18%. Here methane emission is 2%. Here carbon dioxide emission is 48%. Here carbon dioxide emission is 17% only. In addition to it, it also add let us say 18% of carbon, lock it into the soil. So lot amount of carbon that can be locked and less amount of emissions into the soil make this system more climate friendly as compared to non-biochar system. Again, this is this is again a very good report from Nature, and it shows that why addition of biochar reduce the emission of methane into the let us say rice system. So you can see that here basically he took two stages of emissions, that is at tillering stage and heading stage, and three systems, that is control. Light one is control where there is no biochar, and this is light pink color is biochar, and dark color is increased temperature, and then increase carbon and temperature, increase carbon and temperature. Means increased carbon and temperature, addition of no, without addition of biochar and with addition of biochar. So you can see that at both heading and tillering stage, there is reduction in methane emission. That is last figure. If you see that there is a reduction in methane, and if you see this next graph, there is it is mainly reduction. This mainly reduction in methane emission from rice field is basically because of the enhanced activity of methanotropic bacteria, methane oxidation bacteria, and suppression of methanogenic bacteria. There is suppression of methanogenic bacteria, which are responsible for release of methane in the rice system, and that converts methane into carbon dioxide. And that is methanotropic bacteria. Their population is enhanced, and it is mainly responsible for the reduced methane emission on the rice fields. This is again a very good article published in Nature. It shows that among the various practices, if we consider all the set of practices which we can follow in the fields, and the potential of biochar application as far as the mitigation is concerned of greenhouse gases, the maximum potential is of biochar application. It has the maximum potential, that is 1 to 1.8 picogram of carbon dioxide equivalent can be mitigated per year if we adopt this system of adhesive practices in agriculture. And all other systems have some potential, but it is less as compared to biochar system. This is some of the statements by some of the great scientists, and they have said that biochar will represent the single most important initiative for humanity in environmental future. And if you could continue turn a lot of organic matter into biochar, you could over time reverse the history of last 200 years. Means whatsoever we have released into the atmosphere, we can reverse it back. This is again a reclaimed sites, means from different Amazons, Colorado regions. They have spread it biochar and spread the seeds, and you can see that vegetation is coming up within a year. This was my time is. This is my experience. What I have done under the project that I got under NICRA, that this project actually it was on designing controlled release fertilizer utilizing agri-based biochar. So what I did that I converted rice residues, basically rice straw and dry air release. I converted into biochar and converted that biochar into a powder form and intercalated that urea into it. And intercalated urea into it, and then converted that intercalated urea biochar in the form of press, and utilized that in the form of slow release fertilizers. And one way, and another way, I coated urea with this biochar, and again I got a very good slow release pattern in a coated biochar coated urea fertilizers. And by the way, I could increase, let us say, not only the productivity of rice and wheat in the field conditions, but also I could reduce the emissions of greenhouse gas, sequester a lot of carbon into the soil, and let us say increase the nitrogen use efficiency by 15% under field conditions that I got. So I'll be sharing some of my slides. This is actually, we know that nitrogen efficiency is very low in our food production system, and by Haber-Bosch process is the only process by which we can convert atmospheric nitrogen into the fertilizer nitrogen, and it is very costly. The footprint is very high, so the losses that we are making back into the atmosphere is going to be very costly to us. So we need to devise a strategy in order to improve upon the nitrogen use efficiency. Again, this is a graph showing nitrogen efficiency, and it is diminishing. This is how actually I developed our fertilizers. This is in CRISP, so need not to go in detail. This was the release pattern that I studied in an incubation study under laboratory condition, and this was 1 month study. And you can see that I took urea, the commercial urea that is coming, rice husk biourea that I manufactured, rice straw biourea that I manufactured, and in one urea molecule I coated it with biochar and DMO. DMO is demethanized oil obtained from mentha oil as a byproduct in mentha oil extraction. So that has a nitrification inhibitor in it, and with that and mixture of biochar, I coated urea molecule. So what I got that urea release pattern, you can see that I observed urea release, ammonium release, and nitrate release. And I can see that release of nitrogen in the form of urea, ammonium, and nitrate continued up to 30 days in both rice husk and rice straw biochar. However, in urea, it stopped on let us say on 15th, ninth day. On ninth day, there was very low release of, let us say, ammonia. Urea release was not there even after second day in urea. And ammonium release was continued up to 9th day, and nitrate release in urea continued up to 13th day only in incubation study. But however, in our slow release fertilizers, it continued up to 30th day. So we could able to withhold and the release pattern somewhat, and the graph as it is shown that it follows the sigmoidal curve also means somewhat. So it favors. We tested in field conditions also, and this is the field data. When we applied into the field for 4 years, we have continued this experiment in the field, and we can see that agronomic efficiencies. Agronomic efficiencies, as this is second year data, it enhanced from 17% in commercial urea to 22%. So 4% rise is there. Recovery efficiency, there was a rise of, let us say, 13 to 14% in rice crop. In wheat crop, we can say that simultaneously there was a 10% increase in recovery efficiency, and around 9 to 10% increase in agronomic efficiency. This is second year data, and this enhancement has been further increased now. So a good, let us say, characterization that we did in different ratios by urea that we manufactured. Again, this is the SEM images. You can see that this is the urea intercalated biochar. You can see that you cannot find any pore spaces occurring. So all pore spaces were filled with urea molecule. This is a single grain SEM image. This is the multi-grain SEM images. This was the treatment that we carried out in the field conditions, and this was some of the.
Sir, can you explain properly that slide, urea?
This one?
Yes, sir.
These are actually the scan electron microscopy images, SEM images of urea intercalated biochars. Means if you see the SEM image of biochar, you will find like this. It is not there, but you will find, I think initially it was there. You will find, initially it was there. I will show you. Yeah, you will find like this. The image of biochar is like this. You will find lot of pore spaces in it. This is again a SEM image. Okay, the B image.
Yes, sir.
Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And once we intercalated, I forgot to include in my slides. When I intercalated urea into it, or let us say in simple way, you understand that when we mixed dissolved urea into a biochar, then you will find that all pore spaces were filled with urea solution, right?
Yes,
now
sir.
you cannot
Got
find
it, sir.
any pore spaces on the surface.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Huh?
Got it, sir.
So means these are the urea. This is dried urea intercalated biochar dried. So this is a multi-grain picture, and this is a single grain structure. Very high resolution picture is there. A single grain means of micromillimeter, or it is a nanomillimeter. This is 50 micromillimeter, and this is 500 times of 550. This is very means small particle of biochar. You can see that lot of urea being intercalated in all the pores. It is logged in the pore size. So I mean to say that when urea get logged into the pore size and we converted into prills, and then the release pattern of urea got slowed. Means it was sustained for a longer period of time. And so the problems that we find it, because we say that basically when we apply nitrogen, or let us say urea initially, so a lot of urea or nitrogen is being lost through leaching and other sources, because after 7 days, 14 days, based on the crop, and the seed emerges, and then it starts taking nitrogen from the soil. So to that time, a lot of nitrogen has been lost. So to remove that losses and to sustain its availability for a longer period in the crop period, we actually slowed down the release pattern of urea. Is it okay? That when we used biochar, this graph you understand, these three systems we used. First graph, this was no residue system. This was the when we used residue. Second graph, and the third graph is when we use biochar. So these are the release of greenhouse gases. This is carbon dioxide, blue one. Orange one is methane emission. This light gray color is nitrous oxide emission, and this is input carbon dioxide. So when we sum it and with the amount of carbon logged in the soil, we find that there was a positive emission in the no residue. So when we go for residue incorporation into the soil, again the footprint increased. It increased to even more as compared to no residue, because there was more carbon mineralization and more release of carbon dioxide. You can see that a lot of carbon dioxide released in this residue-based system as compared to no residue. And even methane emission was more where residue incorporation was there from the rice fields. But when we went for a biochar-based system, it not only reduced the release of, let us say, greenhouse gases. There was reduction in the methane, there was reduction in the nitrous oxide emission, but there was lot of carbon sequestration. You can see, means lot of carbon was logged into the soil, and it slowed down the carbon mineralization in the soil also. So we can say that this system, biochar-based system, is a negative carbon, has a negative carbon footprint. In the way we can say that this is negative carbon footprint that I told you earlier also, and this was the finding of our research also. And this is the subplot treatments where we went for biochar as well as our fertilizers. We can see that there was a negative footprints in let us say our fertilizer based systems. It also will be helpful. This is again the work of one of our PhD scientists in engineering department. He quantified the amount of soil losses from the slopes, and there is a lot of soil erosion problem in Uttarakhand. And when he used biochar along with PAM, he find that you see that at the left hand side there is no biochar is controlled, and when you apply biochar and PAM, there is a lot of vegetation, and these also act as a soil adherence, or let us say to adhere, or let us say to agglomerate the soil. It reduces the erosion losses, and the reduction in erosion losses was runoff loss was less by 22%, and biochar plus PAM around 50% reduction was there. So we can have reduction in soil erosion and runoff losses also when we go for application of biochar and PAM. This is again an experiment that was carried out here, and we can convert biomass into biochar and mix it with cow dung or clay. We can mix it with cow dung and clay, and by using this small equipments and this briquetting equipment, we can convert that mixture into briquettes. You can see that small briquettes, and these briquettes can be utilized as a fuel for cooking purpose, for generation of energy and other purpose. So this is a case study in a farmer's field, and he was earning around 500 rupees per day by just converting pine needles into biochar and mixing it with clay and cow dung, and converting into biochar this briquettes and using it as a fuel. So this is one of the options for increasing the, let us say, livelihood of the farmer. This is what actually I wanted to say. And at last, we can say that black is not always bad. On Earth ecosystem, we can say that black is new green. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. for your elaboration of this, sir.
Panduraj, if it is,
Yes,
if there is any query,
yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have a few queries, sir.
if there is any query, then
Dear participants, if you have any query, you can post in the chat box. Otherwise, you can directly ask to Dr. Sumit Chaturvedi. So there is one question from Ravi Kumar. Hello, my voice is audible, sir?
please.
Yes, sir. What we can
Your
do,
voice is.
yes, sir. What we can do as an agriculturist for preventing climate change?
Please. There is
Sir, my
one question. Please, sir, say.
Yes, sir. What we can do as an agriculturist for preventing climate change?
Oh, a lot we can do. But my message to you will be that we must not only cry that we are being negatively impacted by whatsoever changes is happening. We must be responsible also, and whatsoever faulty practices that we are adopting that has more carbon footprints, we must try to resolve that and try those management practices which have lesser and lesser or low carbon footprints. So we can promote those technologies which are not only more adaptive to climate change, but also they are more productive, but they are also contributing less towards the climate change. So, as an agriculturist, our responsibility is on both the sides, not only from.
They are not initiating that.
No, that is actually first mandate here is food security first. Means to avail or to get the availability of food material available for the consumption. So first objective is generation of food, and if it is an extra, then such policies even from the ICR and from the government side it can be brought that we can produce sugar cane not only for the conversion into sugar but also for the production of bioethanol. Likewise, other crops like maize and like sorghum, not only we can grow it for, let us say, feed purpose, but also we can grow it for, let us say, generation of bioethanols. So such policies will be coming.
Of foods,
Uh,
but it is too late. मतलब लेकिन सर मतलब आई विल कम इन हिंदी कि हम सर देर नहीं कर देंगे सर हमारी जनरेशन के लिए,
देखो ऐसा
if we are only thinking about food.
हाँ बेटा, अब देखो अब ऐसी पॉलिसीज आ रही हैं. देयर आर नाउ वी आर डाइवर्टिंग आवर एग्रीकल्चर टू कमर्शियल एग्रीकल्चर, बट just to convert into commercial agriculture, we need to lot of policy backups, lot of industry supports, lot of other supports also. Just by converting into commercial products, we cannot say that it will be brought into the market. मेरा कहने का मतलब ये है कि अगर हम ये कहते हैं कि आप इथेनॉल के लिए शुगर केन उगाएं, अगर इंडस्ट्री नहीं है ऑन स्टेक, उसको बाय करने के लिए कोई नहीं है ऑन let us say most of the farmers, they are not producing much, they cannot take risk out of their let us say enterprises. So what such policies if come, let us say if there is an industry set up from the government side or from the private sector and it promote sugarcane production for bioethanol only and buy back it, then such contract farming farmers are government is bringing in new policies, but again farmers are revolting. So there means a lot of integrate relationship. So that we need to address first. Then only we can say that we can bring it for ethanol production or not. In Western world, you can see that lot of sugarcane, maize, sorghum, they are basically being diverted for feed purpose or for ethanol production, but they are consuming it. But if you want. I will give you the address. If you want, at what level, if you want to, let us say, adopt it, at small scale, if you want to adopt it for experiment purpose, let us say, for, then we can get it for you. Otherwise, if you want it for a large scale, then you have to get it from private.
Sir, at small purpose. Actually, sir, I am student. So for
Mhm.
experiment purpose.
If you want it for experiment purpose, then it costs around 25,000 rupees. You can get it manufactured at your end only. I will give you the protocol how to manufacture it. So you can get it, or you can order here in engineering department and get it manufactured.
It means, sir,
It will
we
be
can
available.
buy it from.
Pantnagar. Pantnagar, you can get buy it.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your deep knowledge about
Okay.
crop residue biochar with us. Your session was full of enthusiasm and valuable knowledge, sir. The interaction with the participants was really outstanding. You are outwardly explained how climate is changing over the years. It is really penny worthy and esteemed discussion over this webinar. I hope that all the participants here enriched through his shared knowledge. Sir, it is really a red letter day for me, sir. It is really red letter for me seeing you after a long period on this virtual forum. I hope we will meet you soon, getting chances to visit Pantnagar for future conference as well as CAP training.
Okay.
Thank you once again, sir.
Okay, I thank in the last Vice Chancellor of that university and giving me this opportunity, Dr. D.K. Singh. I am very thankful to invite me, and Dr. Pandiraj especially is my student and beloved student, very good student. He is there, and I also convey my regards to all the students and all the participants, basically students of that university. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.